Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining me. I want to take a few minutes to talk to you about the impact that technology and media have had on the English language in the last 100 years or so. So let's begin. The British Broadcasting Company, which was later called the British Broadcasting Corporation, or the BBC, has been part of the worldwide spread of English since 1922. Prior to World War II, it was considered an instructive tool and used to standardize spoken English in England and in England's colonies around the world. Presenters were required to speak in the broadcast English accent, which was later referred to as received pronunciation, or RP. These presenters were thought to be models of proper English accent from London to India to Australia and beyond. The BBC Advisory on Spoken English was formed early in the BBC's history to rule on matters of usage and to maintain linguistic standards. Kind of like a radio-specific language academy. Radio expansion in the 1960s and 70s led to a number of accents being aired that would never have been allowed on the radio before. American radio wasn't unified like the BBC. Oh, side note, BBC used to be radio, now it's like a television network. They still have radio, but it started as like a radio company. So American radio wasn't unified like the BBC. There were local stations across the country that functioned as auxiliaries of larger networks like NBC or CBS. And because of these diverse locations, American accents weren't monitored or controlled as heavily on American radio as they were on British radio. And so from the start, American radio was intended as commercial entertainment. And so there's less emphasis on instruction and enforcing a national standard. The large stations eventually adopted what we call network English, which is kind of like the American version of broadcast English, right? It's grammatically correct, it's classless, and it's unaccented. Television is typically seen as a factor in linguistic change, and not always in a good way. Like modern radio, American and more recent British television demonstrate a variety of different accents. This type of representation may normalize formally stigmatized accents, but then again, it also may enforce stereotypes based on accent. Okay, so for example, if an individual featured on a TV program exhibits some of the negative traits associated with an accent, class, or region, confirmation bias may work to lead viewers to believe their assumptions about that accent are correct. So the example that sticks out in my mind is the television show, The Beverly Hillbillies. I think what made that show so popular was kind of the paradox of these people who talk like they're from the backwoods, but they struck oil and now they're rich and now they live in a mansion, and they can't seem to let go of that language and that accent and just that culture. Okay. Another potential side effect of television is that if more people attempt to imitate the prestige dialect, it may lead to a decrease in other accents. TV, beyond a doubt, contributes to the spread of new vocabulary, it contributes to idioms, and it contributes to popular sayings. Sociolinguist Jack Chambers actually claimed that television can't actually change language use because face-to-face interaction is required for change. I'm not sure I believe him. I think television can have some effect on language change, so I don't know. The internet, its impact on language is often compared to that of Caxton's printing press and has been called the progenitor of a global data revolution. And I gotta say, since the internet was invented, language has come a long, long way, right? So the internet was invented in 1983 for the use of highly specialized educational and governmental interests. Almost a decade later, web browsers were developed for public use, although it took perhaps another decade for internet access to be widespread enough to have a major impact on the spread of language. The technology making the internet possible seemed perfectly suited to English with its few inflections and minimal diacritical marks. English is especially convenient for keyboards and phone keypads. And we're talking early stages here, right? Where like you used to have to press a button up to 3 times to get the letter you want. Don't judge me, I'm old. Okay? And it's the most common language, English. It's the most common language on the internet today, according to some sources. According to linguistic commentator David Crystal, texters around the world use Americanized abbreviations despite their native language. And I think that's fascinating. Under the media folder, actually, there's a video of David Crystal talking about, the global change to language, and it's fascinating, and I want you all to watch it. In the last decade or so, the development of file sharing platforms and social media and translation software have exponentially increased the rate of informational and linguistic exchange. Texting and social media are perceived often as having negative linguistic ramifications. I mean, it has a lot of negative ramifications, but linguistic ramifications is what we're focusing on. My personal belief is that texting and social media posting, with its freer, more flexible style and refusal to bend to convention, is leading to a wave of prescriptivism, right? So texting and social media are leading to people writing the way they speak, which blurs the previously always distinct lines between speech and written text. And many people fear that young people are losing their ability to write, or that they'll only write as if they're posting on Instagram, regardless of the actual venue. Andrea Lunsford, a professor at Stanford, has found in her research of thousands of freshman composition papers that that's not true. That's not to say that it's not false. There are some students coming in who are writing in the kind of texting vernacular, but the inverse is true. There are some students who realize that there is kind of a line between spoken and written language, even though that line is often blurred. It turns out, however, that millennials, so millennials are around my age, maybe a little older, are writing more than any generation before, and they have a greater awareness of audience than, previous amateur writers. Millennials apparently also develop greater emotional sensitivity and self-awareness in terms of communicating content via written language. The way that people use English to communicate on the internet has been given a variety of names. David Crystal refers to it as NetSpeak. Other academics have called it NetLingo or Weblish. And if these terms seem outdated to you, that's because they are. Current internet speakers refer to internet language in a variety of ways. Two of the most common is 133.7 speak or Leet speak and LOLs speak. Leet speak is online gamers prefer that one, and meme fans use LOL speak. Crystal identifies several unique aspects of NetSpeak that separated it from standard English, right? So one, its distinctive lexicon with semantic change, for example, with spam and trolls. the use of abbreviations like Rebus or LOL or L8R for later. Graphic conventions like using all caps to shout are unique to the internet, and the display of emotion through emojis, emoticons, repetition, and exaggeration are all unique to this type of communication. And we're not necessarily seeing that in language. We also see purposeful misspellings and minimalist or deviant punctuation as a way of playfully engaging with language and rebelling against restrictive standards. Okay. This idea of NetSpeak, however, is heavily criticized, and people aren't quite sure where we're going with it. Okay, so this was my last lecture with you. I know, I'm going to miss you all so much. But what I want to do is I want to leave you with the introduction to chapter 13, which you'll be reading next week. So Sparkvik and Leach use powerful rhetoric to close out their book. So read along with me. I'm on page 237. In this book, we have followed the English language throughout its history over a period of some 1,500 years. It's a remarkable story. From a Germanic embryo came a small insular language, which in time grew into a world language. So what happens to English now? Will there be many Englishes or just one? Will the international use and learning of English continue to grow, or will other languages take its place? It is difficult to predict the future of languages. Some would say impossible. But at least we can examine the linguistic situation as it is developing today and try to make informed speculations about the future. Although we cannot predict in what way English will change, we can be certain that change it will. That's in the nature of languages. It's only dead languages like Latin or artificial languages such as mathematical notations that do not change. I have truly enjoyed having you all in this class. I'm going to miss you guys so much. There is no lecture for next week. There's just a reading, a discussion board post, and a practical assignment. As always, you know the drill. Email me if you have any questions, and have a great day.